Good morning. Welcome to this edition of the Lynn Hayes Freeland Show. You know, it's interesting because originally I was going to start this show off and say we're not talking about politics at all on this show. But just before we started rolling tape, our guest today told me about something that he had talked about that connected politics and finances. So we are going to talk about politics just a little bit. But our focus is really going to be on finances today on the show. Also coming up, this is National Adoption Month, and we're going to talk about our waiting children. We're going to talk about success stories, and we're going to talk about how you, the community, can get involved to help make a difference in the lives of children in our area who are waiting to be adopted. We begin, however, as I said, with a look. We're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about you, how you manage your money. You know, these are tough economic times. We certainly realize that. I know that I've had to rethink, redo, reevaluate a whole lot of things in my life. Part of that has to do with the fact that I have 2 kids in college. But that's a separate issue. That's a separate show. We can talk about that some other time. Ronald Wilson is our guest. He's with Smith Barney, and he's going to help us work through a lot of these issues. And just before, as I said, we started rolling this tape, you mentioned to me that you were involved in a program over at WAMO, Sheridan Broadcasting,
yes,
just before the election, that talked about getting out the vote in particular, but making a parallel between our vote and our finances. And that just kind of set a light off in my head, because so often we go in and vote and we think we're voting for a candidate, but in fact, what we did on Election Day had a direct impact on our finances, and probably this election more than any other election.
Absolutely. I mean, when you go into the booth, you're voting on issues, and part of what we tried to do on that show was not make people understand it was not only important to vote for the president, but also for the elected officials as well, because that even more so directly impacts you. So you've got to think about the tax rates, what's going to happen with insurance. You've got to think about all of those things. They're going to impact your wallet, and so we tried to get people to understand that before they went into the booth.
Before they went into the booth. Okay, so now we're after folks went into the booth.
Yes.
And we're all kind of in this, or sitting on this economic bubble. And the realities are, things are tight, things are tough. What are some of the biggest problems, the issues that your clients, the folks you deal with, are bringing to you? It's
really across the board, because I work with a whole spectrum of clients. But, you know, a lot of what you hear in the news about is where the tax rate's going to be in a couple of years. And so folks that are invested are wondering, how much am I going to pay on my capital gains? How much am I going to pay on dividends? So to some degree, that's going to affect their investment strategy, you know, going forward. And even for folks who, you know, aren't currently invested, if I do decide to put my money in the market, what's going to happen when I decide to take it out? So those were very important issues. And the problem that we have now is that we just don't know where the economy is going. So there was a lot of conversation and promises and things that happened on the campaign trail. But right now, I don't know if the new administration can dictate the policy, or whether the economic crisis is going to dictate the policy. And right now, I probably think it's the latter. So it's difficult to say what's really going to happen, because this is just so unprecedented.
It's all so new. One of the things that I noticed, certainly sitting around the newsroom and among the folks I talk to, and maybe you can help me out with this, there are some folks I work with that check their 401ks every day. Then there's this other school of thought that says, just don't look, just don't look. What do you do?
You've got to be somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
It's, you know, if you're going to make yourself physically sick by looking at it every day and seeing it going down, that's probably not a good idea. But it's also not a good idea to completely ignore it. And I think part of the problem is folks weren't looking at the statements when times were good and thought that those times were going to continue forever. And it's easy to get lulled to sleep. And when, you know, maybe they should have been looking at those statements back then and saying, hey, it's been great, but maybe it's time for me to, you know, make some moves now. So I think somewhere in between, you know, checking it periodically is where you should be.
I think a lot of this, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong here, a lot of this comes down to taking some control about your future. I mean, the realities are, generations before us, the whole goal was to find a job that you could work at long enough to get a pension so you could retire. That was just kind of the mission.
Right.
And then that changed, and then we got overwhelmed, and now there's a whole segment in our community that doesn't really know how to proceed from here.
Well, I'll tell you what, it seems like a lot of us suffer from this plague called the GHN complex. Have you ever heard about that?
No.
It's the gotta have it now complex.
Okay.
So what happens is I don't know what happened to, you know, saving for a rainy day. and now it's probably as rainy as it's ever going to get. But I'm not really sure what happened to that. We've got to take a step back and realize that, you know, even amongst all the talk of bailouts and all these other things that are happening in the government, we're still responsible for our own well-being. And there was a time when your company said, hey, come work for us. We'll take care of you for the rest of your life, and that's just not happening. We're responsible for our own well-being. So we've got to take a step back, actually save for the things that we want, and think about how you're going to plan for your retirement. We've got to take that burden back on ourselves.
Okay, we got to take a commercial break. We have a lot more ground to cover this morning on the Lynn Hayes Freeland Show. We're talking about your finances. We're going to talk about layoffs, how to plan for that. I don't know if you can really plan for it, but you can certainly do some things to put yourself in a position to at least handle it if it comes knocking on your door. Also coming up, we're going to talk about National Adoption Month, so you know what? You don't want to go anywhere. And don't forget, you can always log on to our website at kdka.com, and you can just watch us over and over and over again. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Don't go away. The Lynn Hayes Freeland Show will return in a moment.